Yo, everybody. Welcome back to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Very excited to continue this segment. 32 picks, 32 days. I'm not going to do this exactly in 32 days. I'm not dragging this out. I'm going to do it, obviously as I want to do it, as I see fit. If I got the knowledge, I'm putting it out there. So, that being said, I've done 1, 2, and 3. I've done the Browns. I've done the Niners. I've done the Bears. Just finished the Bears. Now, I'm doing the 4th overall selection. Who holds that 4th overall selection in the 2017 draft? That is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jacksonville made a lot of changes this offseason. Tom Coughlin, VP, Vice President of Football Ops, whatever you want to call it. He's in charge of everything, day-to-day operations, whatever. There's the GM, Jim Caldwell, and then there is the notorious one. His name is not Conor McGregor. His name is not Biggie. It is Doug Marrone, formerly known as Saint Doug, or so he referred to himself as Saint Doug during his time with the Buffalo Bills. Not a guy that I have at the top of my greatest NFL people list in terms of the best people in the NFL. He's probably at the bottom or at the very, very bottom, right there along with the unemployed Chip Kelly. That is where Doug Marrone should be. He should be unemployed. He should not have a head coaching job. Any team in the back of my mind that I thought would give this guy a second chance at a head coaching opportunity would be either the Browns or the Jacksonville Jaguars. Why? Because they've been mediocre for the last 20 years, along with his first employer, the Buffalo Bills. I hate to say it, I'm a Bills fan, but it's the truth. Mediocre teams think highly of this guy. That's the truth. If a formerly top-ranked team, their coach retired or something like that, Doug Marrone would not even be on their radar. I don't care what anyone says. It's just fact. The fact that they brought this guy in to think that he would improve their chances of being competitive blows my mind. It really does. But he was one of the last coaches to make the Bills a respectable team with the craziest of circumstances. And I do see his side of the story in a way of trading up to take a guy like a Sammy Watkins when they didn't have the circumstances in which they could mortgage their future for a rookie wide receiver. They weren't in that position. They had too many holes to fill on their team to mortgage the future. It's never even a good thing, even if you don't have a lot of holes on your team, to mortgage the future for anybody, let alone if you do. So I get his perspective on that. But coaches, they quit on their teams and quit on their players, are not coaches. They're quitters. And he quit. For the lack of a better term, he opted out due to the fact that the team had new ownership heading its way. So he opted out, decided to go a different direction, and it led him to Jacksonville as the offensive line coach, where they had one of the worst offensive line units in the National Football League, possibly the worst, and they promoted him. They didn't just promote him. They gave him the top dog position on their team, the head coach, rather than the GM and the owner and the whatever. That is the top, in his world, that's the top position, the NFL head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. But to me, when I heard that they brought him in, and then I also heard that they were bringing in Tom Coughlin, I thought to myself, okay, Tom Coughlin's running the show. Doug Marrone is just his backup, whatever. That is somewhat concerning because I know Tom Coughlin and Doug Marrone have worked together in years past. They know of each other. They're both Syracuse guys. But that type of personality that Doug Marrone has, clashing with the personality that Tom Coughlin has, I don't see that working out. I could definitely see Doug Marrone getting his way out of there again somehow, whether they fire him or not, and Tom Coughlin eventually taking the full reins, being the head coach and the vice president of football operations, much like Bill Belichick is in New England. That is more likely to me than Doug Marrone having any sort of success because of himself. The Jaguars having any sort of success because of Doug Marrone. I think it's more likely that he pushes himself out the door again, and Tom Coughlin takes that job. He wanted to be a head coach again anyway. He said that he didn't, but I think he really, deep down in his heart, I think he did. And I see that happening. Now, in terms of what direction should the franchise go in, they're not going to take a quarterback. Only one is off the board as of now, to me, on Ryan Thomas's mock so far. And that was a quarterback that you guys have to tune in and listen to find out who that was. I'm not going to tell you. So, that being said, quarterback is not an option for this team. Options for the team, Blake Bortles is their quarterback. He had a rough year last year, but I think that they'll move forward with him, and maybe even a veteran option to boot, and maybe have him waiting in the wings if Bortles decides to have an off year again, gets off to a rough start. So I've said this before, this draft is a premium on pass rushers. There's awesome pass rushers in this draft, and I think the next one to go would be defensive end Solomon Thomas from Stanford. He's a very talented defensive end. I think on my board he's right up there with Myles Jarrett and Jonathan Allen. You could pick, whichever ones you want. Allen is an interior D lineman. Jarrett is a defensive end. Allen's a D tackle, and Solomon Thomas is a defensive end as well. So besides Myles Jarrett, who, it could be argued Solomon Thomas is better. He's just as big, just as strong, virtually unblockable in the bowl game that Stanford played in this past year. I really want to see what he brings to the NFL. He reminds me a lot, and this is high praise, he reminds me a lot of a Michael Strahan, but bigger and just as fast. And that says a lot, because Michael Strahan is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He reminds me of Michael Strahan. That was the first guy I thought of when I saw his tape. And they did draft Dante Fowler a couple years ago. He did have the injury that he had, and it was a rough one. Missed his rookie year, tore his knee in training camp. But John Elway said it best. John Elway, the GM of the Denver Broncos, said it best. His goal as a GM, when he was first brought in by Denver, was to bring in a quarterback and bring in guys who can get after the quarterback. They brought in a quarterback in Blake Bortles. They brought in a guy that can get after the quarterback in Dante Fowler Jr. But he missed his rookie year. He's slow in his development. He's a little bit behind. And Solomon Thomas is a talent that you do not scoff at 4th overall. The running back situation is not that great. TJ Yeldon has disappointed. Chris Ivory, the money they gave him, he's disappointed as well. But Solomon Thomas is better at that point than one of those options. Even though I really am high on Leonard Fournette and Dalvin Cook, I think Solomon Thomas makes more sense for the Jaguars continuing to build this defensive team. One of the things that I did not look up was the current Jacksonville Jaguars defensive coordinator. And the reason why I didn't look him up is because this is a guy in Solomon Thomas that it doesn't matter where you put him. It doesn't matter if it's a 4-3. It doesn't matter if it's a 3-4. He's a guy that can fit in the scheme no matter what. And I'm looking at this now. Todd Wash was named the defensive coordinator. Led the defense to a top 10 rankings. This is a top 10 defense going into 2017. They could become a top 5 defense if they bring in a guy like Solomon Thomas. Building a strength is what puts teams in the championship. You look at the Seattle Seahawks. They had some pieces already there on defense. They bring in more. They had Bruce Irvin. They bring in Sherman. They bring in Earl Thomas. They make these guys. They draft. They built a defense over a series of drafts. And this is what the Jaguars are doing. Wash is an experienced guy. I like the fact that this isn't even so much as Doug Marrone's staff. This is Tom Coughlin's staff. So it's a very weird power struggle between the VP and the head coach already that I'm starting to see. Coughlin's the day-to-day guy. Marrone just coaches the guys, which, they have to be on the same page, but it appears already that Coughlin has put his imprints on this team from the get-go. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. You have Andrew Luck in this division. You have Brock Osweiler, and this is so far. You have Andrew Luck, you have Brock Osweiler, you have Marcus Mariota. You have some decent quarterbacks in this division. Luck being one of them, Mariota being the other. Brock Osweiler I'm not too high on, but Houston could go in the direction of taking Tony Romo, bringing in Tony Romo, whining and dining him, telling him that he could be the stopgap Super Bowl winning quarterback for the Houston Texans, which is very possible. And Mariota's coming off an injury, so they just re-signed Matt Castle. I don't think Mariota's injury is too serious. Like as far as his recovery, I believe he actually tore his knee, but his recovery has been going pretty well. But you need all the pass rushers that you can get. John Elway brings in Peyton Manning. He brings in Von Miller, brings in DeMarcus Ware. There's never a amount of pass rushers that you don't want that. There's never a set number of pass rushers that you need. You need all the pass rushers that you can get, especially when you have quarterbacks that like to move around in the pocket, like Andrew Luck, like Marcus Mariota, guys that like to extend plays. Even Tony Romo, if you were to head to Houston, he's the guy that likes to extend plays. Brock Osweiler is pretty much a sitting duck in the pocket. He's more of a pocket quarterback kind of guy as opposed to Luck and Mariota. So I think Solomon Thomas would be the pick 4th overall. This is a guy that, for whatever reason, unbeknownst to me, he is rising up draft boards. But unbeknownst to me, I'm shocked that more people don't know about him. He went to Stanford. He played against top competition, went up against some of the best linemen in the country. Oftentimes, on the big stage, he was double-teamed, and it still didn't matter. This guy is a wrecking machine. He's a bull in a china shop. And I really enjoyed, when I looked at all the prospects, he was somebody that I looked at, and I'm like, wow, this guy could be really, really special. He could be somebody that could come into a team and be a franchise defensive end, which is very rare. We haven't really seen that. As opposed, besides Von Miller, Jadeveon Clowney is starting to come into his own, but he could be one of those guys. He could be a Von Miller. He could be a Jadeveon Clowney. It could be very interesting. The Jets' defense could have 2 young defensive ends for many years to come in Fowler and Thomas. And obviously his last name is a good one. Thomas being his last name, Thomas being my last name. It's no coincidence that he is a athletic specimen like myself. But I'm very excited to see what they do. I think Solomon Thomas could be an option. I would take him there at 4 if I was Jacksonville. As far as what could happen besides Solomon Thomas, Jamal Adams, a safety from LSU, could be taken there. Leonard Fournette or Dalvin Cook from Florida State could be taken there. The Florida State Jacksonville connection, you look at UCF, that's where Blake Bortles played. You look at Dante Fowler, he went to Florida. So they like taking players that are close by, and that could be a destination for Dalvin Cook. Could be 4th overall at Jacksonville. Could be what could be considered the first reach when essentially he's on most draft boards the number 1 running back in this year's draft class. So it'll be very interesting. But so far, I got the Browns, Niners, Bears, Jaguars, all done, and it is time to wrap this one up. So tune into all the rest. They're on the YouTube channel at Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Ryan Thomas is my name. I'm the host of the show. Thank you for tuning in.